13. Go, Majestic, to Republic Command, Coruscant. On station and awaiting contact from Omega Squad. All communications from Teklet ground station have ceased. Separatist vessel has approached and is standing off our port bow at 50 kilometers. Has not responded to signals, but is believed to be a Techno-Union armed transport. Will engage if vessels appears to be taking hostile actions. Standing by. Turned out nice again, Fi said, somewhere ahead of the column. You've been on the stims? Nina asked. I'm just naturally cheerful. Well, I'm not. So where did you get it from? Nina didn't like being tail on a patrol. He walked backwards, scanning the trees, wondering why he was this close to Imbrani without a sign of enemy contact since Teklet. Tinnies couldn't climb trees. It was the rats he was worried about. Want to swap? Fi said. I'm fine. Just say the word. Fi was about 100 meters ahead on point. Aten walked behind Gutenay. The weak way was carrying a fair share of the ordnance and equipment they'd had to load on their backs since abandoning the excavator droid and the speeder bike. Very quiet, all things considered, Aten said. Mind if I sent up a remote? Might as well, Nina said. Patch visual through to all of us, will you? We there yet? Gudrunay asked. Soon. Nina hadn't found the weak ways much use so far, except as a pack animal. All he seemed to know about Hokin's tactics was that they hurt bad. Now, are you going to be cooperative, or am I going to return you to your boss? You not do that. It's cruel, it is. He'll probably just give you a big kiss and tell you how much he misses you. He gonna cut my... I'm sure he will. Want to tell us more about the droids? 100. Any SPDs? What? Super Battle Droids. Nina indicated the bulky shape with his arms held away from his sides, letting his rifle hang on its webbing. Big ones. No, I see none anyway. I told you we should have slaughtered him, Fi said. Still, he carried a bit of gear. I suppose we ought to cut him some slack for that. The metallic sphere of the remote rose just above the level of the trees and shot off. Nina's field of visions was interrupted, and one quadrant by an aerial view of the countryside. As the remote tracked along paths and swooped among branches, it was clear that nobody was about. A worrying thing in itself. Then it dived in to show a familiar figure, stripped to the waist, bending over a makeshift basin of soapy water, fashioned from sections of plastoid sheet. The remote hovered above Darman as he reached for his rifle, not even raising his eyes. Sarge, is that you? Nina was staring into the business end of Darman's Dees. It was a sobering close-up, We're about 10 minutes from the RV. Going anywhere nice? The rifle disappeared from the frame, and Darman, half-shaved, stared back. Knock first, will you? I'm glad to see you too. Where do you get that wound? This one? Or this one? The burn. A Trandoshan's, ex-Trandoshan's, actually. We've had a little more attention than we'd have liked. The commander's still in one piece? Well, this bruise is hers. I'm teaching her to fight dirty. She's catching on. Get the kettle boiling then. We are bringing a guest. Damian's faintly impatient expressions dwindled below the remote and was replaced by an open view of Ambrani. It wasn't so much a town as a scattering of farms, with a few knots of industrial-looking buildings dotted among them. A 10 cent higher, and a few more remote buildings were visible. Take it in over the villa, Nina said. Open country, Sarge. Bit risky. I think we've lost the elements of surprise. Okay. Long lens, though. What are you doing? Gudane asked. To him, they were traveling in silence. He couldn't hear the conversations going on between helmet comlinks. Nana switched channels with a couple of deliberate blinks, taking a look at that villa. I know about the villa. We all know about the villa. Nana would have welcomed a visit from Jinot. They hadn't seen the shapeshifter since yesterday. She could have been anywhere, of course, but she hadn't made herself visible. He hoped she hadn't run into problems. 5 minutes now. No time at all. They'd be scrawled again, and they'd have a commander. They'd be at the RV, and then they could rest up, eat, have a wash, and generally clear their heads. It began to feel like good news. There was just the matter of taking Uthan and the nanovirus, then getting out in one piece. Etain had almost grown used to thinking of Darman's armored anomaly as a friendly face. Then 3 more exactly like him emerged from the trees and disturbed that fragile equilibrium. And then they took their helmets off. It was rude, she knew, but all she could do was stare, and she found herself slowly putting her hands to her mouth in an attempt to disguise her shock. Yes, sorry about the Reekway, Commander, one of them said. He had Darman's voice and Darman's face. He's a bit ripe, I know. We'll have him clean himself up. They were utterly identical, except for one with a terrible scar across his face. The other 2 seemed like different moods of the same man, one serious, one pleasantly calm and unconcerned. They were all staring at her. I can't tell you apart, she said. I'm Cece. No, you have proper names. I know you have names. It's not policy, Commander. Darman lowered his eyes. It's a private thing. Everyone calls me Phi, said the calm one, clearly not bothered by policy. And this is Atin? Nina, the serious one said, and saluted. Etain couldn't sense a great deal from either of them, but the scarred Atin exuded a sense of loss that was almost solid. She could feel its weight. She tried to concentrate on the weak way. She didn't need to tap into the force to tell that he was terrified. He was bent over as if about to drop to his knees, staring up at her. Weequay didn't all look the same. She knew this one. He had chased her across a bark field. He was a rapist and a murderer. Not that the descriptions set him apart from any other of Hoken's thugs. She reached for her lightsaber. "Whoa," Damian said. "Girly," Guthernae said. "I'll give you girly," she said. But Damian caught her arm, and she was instantly ashamed of her reaction. Again, it was anger. It was what stood between her and making sense of her calling. She had to get the better of it. If Damian could exercise force without venom, then so could she. "What's he here for?" she asked, thumbing off the blade. "We thought he might have useful information," Nina said. Etain was desperate to be useful. She felt as if she were only capable of performing conjuring tricks. Enough skills to distract, but not enough to be a functioning soldier. She also wanted Damian to stop treating her as if she were merely in need of a little more instructions. She wanted him to tell her how much he despised all that potential power wasted on a girl with no discipline or focus. He wasn't stupid. He had to be thinking that. What do we need to know, Nina?" "How Hoken thinks, Commander." "Give me some time with him." Guthernae straightened up and took one step back, shaking his head. He was expecting Hoken-style treatment. Vi chuckled. "Guthernae thinks you're going to cut off his, braids, ma'am." Braids? She'd forgotten. She pulled a section of hair free of her collar, plaited it as fast as she could, and fumbled in her pocket for a piece of cord to fasten it. "This is what you are. Live up to it, if only to justify Damian's faith in you." "We're going to have a little chat," she said. She let her braid fall back inside her collar. "Sit down, Guthernae." It wasn't easy for him to settle down on the ground with his hands still tied, but Etain wasn't taking any chances. He knelt and then fell sideways in an undignified sprawl. She hauled him into a sitting position, and they sat outside the shelter in silence. She wanted him to calm down before she attempted to influence him. A sudden clack of armor made her glance over her shoulder, and she was astonished to see Atin giving Damian an awkward hug, slapping him on the back. She caught Damian's eye. He looked bewildered. Whatever had given Atin his huge emotional burden had been slightly relieved by finding Damian well. Then the two men parted as if nothing in particular had happened. Etienne turned back to Goutonnet, suddenly very aware that, for all their calm manner and unnatural appearance, these soldiers were every bit as painfully human as she was, bred to fight. A new doubt was growing in her. She shook it off and turned to Goutonnet, who wouldn't meet her eyes. "You're not afraid," she said quietly, and visualized the gentle trickle of water from the fountain of her clan home on Coruscant. "You're relaxed, and you want to talk about Gez Hokan." He certainly did. "Haven't seen Janot," Darman said. "Not since yesterday." Nina cleaned his armor. It didn't matter how visible they were now, and he hated its scruffy rig. Darman had stripped down his Dees and was wiping the ignition chamber more than it needed it. Fi wandered around the temporary camp, cradling his rifle, keeping watch. "Well, whether she's here or not, I think we go in sooner rather than later." "The villa or the facility?" "Latest intel we have from Janot indicates the villa." But, I'd find it hard to walk away from a place I could defend too. That villa's nothing but firewood." He put down the shoulder plate he was cleaning. "Show me that plan again." Darman clipped the DC-17 back together and reached into his belt for the holochart sphere. "She did okay to get this, our commander." Janot seemed dismissive of her. "Come on, Nina. She's a Jedi. She's an officer." "Well, what do you think?" Darman rubbed the bridge of his nose. "She's got a lot of fight in her. And she's not exactly Scarata, but she's learning fast. And you should see the Jedi stuff she can do. There's more to it than just the fighting skills." Nina occasionally had his doubts about non-clone officers. They all did. They never admitted it publicly, but Scarata had warned them, quietly, privately, that outside officers sometimes needed help. And while you always obeyed orders, you needed to be able to make helpful interpretations if the officers was less than specific. Officers could unintentionally get you killed. "Nobody's Karata," Nina said. He was watching the commanders discreetly. Whatever she had done to Goutonnet had transformed him into a true conversationalist. She was actually looking bored, as if she'd been cornered by someone who really wanted to explain every engineering detail of a repeating blaster. "You have to admit, that's quite a skill," Darman said. Nina tried not to think about it. It made him uneasy, not knowing how many of his actions were his own choice. He didn't like the other conflicts she created in him either. He had never been this close to a human female before, and he was relieved that she was emaciated, unkempt, and generally less than appealing. The proximity still made him feel edgy, though, and from the way Darman was looking at him, it seemed they shared the realization. They both watched Goutonnet unburdening himself to the commander until she seemed to tire of it and got up from her cross-legged position. She walked over and looked at both of them uncertainly. "I'm sorry, Darman," she said to Nina. Then she gave an embarrassing shrug. "Sorry. Of course you're Nina. I got a little detail out of him. But he isn't the analytical type. Analytical type, I'm afraid. I can tell you that Hawkins carries a Verpan shatter gun and a custom KYD-21 blaster. He's got a lot of Trandoshan's equipment, and as far as any of the militia knew, there were no more than 100 battle droids at the garrison. Hawkins is also apparently something of a game player. He likes to bluff and double bluff." Nina considered the information. "That's useful, Commander. Thank you. I was going to see if I could summon Jeanette. She could probably see what's happening down there at the villa." "Can you do that?" Darman asked. "I can sense her when she wants me to. I'll see if she can sense me." She stared down at her boots. "And please don't call me Commander. I haven't earned the rank. Until I do, if I ever do, I'm Etain. Darman knows that, don't you, Darman?" He nodded. Nina didn't feel comfortable with that. He liked to know who stood where in the hierarchy of things. "Whatever you say." "Can I ask you a question?" "Certainly." "Why did you say, of course, you're Nina?" She paused. "You feel different. All of you. You might look the same, but you're not. I don't normally identify individuals by their effect on the Force, but I can if I concentrate." "We seem different to you?" "You know you are, surely. You know you're Nina, and he knows he's Darman. You're as self-aware as I am, as any other human." "Yes, but all beings are individuals, and their essence in the Force reflects that. The act of living makes us different, and in that way, you're like twins, only more so. Etan's very different. What happened to him to make him so burdened?" The answer stunned Nina. He was used to being a product. His squad and his sergeant had treated him like a man, but the Kaminoans certainly hadn't. This was the first time that a Jedi, a commander, had confirmed the clone commandos' intensely private suspicions that they were no less than normal men. It was no longer a secret descent that had to be hidden. Etan was the only survivor of his first squad. Then he was reassigned and lost all three brothers in actions again, Nina said. He feels guilty. Poor man, she said. Does he talk about it? Not much. Perhaps I could help him see he has nothing to feel guilty about. Just a little encouragement. Nothing like the influence I use on the weekways, I promise. That's kind of you. We have to look out for each other. Right then. Nina didn't care if she had less idea of guerrilla warfare than a Mott. She possessed one fundamental element of leadership that you couldn't teach in a lifetime. She cared about those she led. She had earned her rank on the strength of that alone. Contact, 500 meters, Fi said. The squad abandoned their impromptu meal of stewed dried meat and put their helmets back on. Etain was again surprised at how fast they moved. They were lying prone in the undergrowth, rifles trained, in the time it took her to turn and check where the weekway was. You're not going to make a sound, Kootenai. You want to be totally silent. He was, but she felt what was approaching. She scrambled into the bushes on her hands and knees, and leaned close to Daman. It's Janot, she said. Relax. Daman, Fi, and Etain sat back on their heels. Nina stayed prone. She still lined up on his sights, and held his hand away from the trigger in a conspicuous gesture. Nina likes to be sure, Daman said. No offense. The grass shook visibly, and then a living oil slick flowed past the kneeling commandos. It seemed to be carrying something horrific in its black swirls. The slick resolved itself into Janot's natural form, and she had a huge lump of raw meat in her jaws. She laid it on the ground. I gave you plenty of warning, Janot said, staring at Nina. She sniffed the air and appeared to follow an invisible beacon with her long snout. Her gaze settled on Kootenai, dozing against a tree, bound hands in his lap. What possessed you to collect that souvenir? We thought he might come in handy, Fi repeated. You can't even eat weekways, Janot said, and metamorphosed into her human form. Better not let the creature see me for what I am, just in case. Have you eaten? Would you like some Murray? Fi took his helmet off and grinned. We've got time for that, have we? You might as well fight on a full stomach, Janot said. You have a tough job on your hands. Fi picked up the leg of Merle and rinsed it with water from his bottle. Da, you got any of that dried fruit left? He ejected the vibroblade from his knuckle plate and began cutting the leg into chunks. Etain wondered how he had developed his relentless good humor. She couldn't imagine him shooting anyone. One thing she had discovered in the last few days was that professional soldiers were neither habitually angry nor violent. They didn't even talk tough. They were a mass of contradictions, They washed their clothing and they shaved and cooked and generally conducted themselves like well-behaved, well-educated Padawans. Then they went out and blew up installations and killed total strangers and cracked bad jokes. Etain was getting used to it, but slowly. While Etain kept an eye on Goutonnet, the rest of them sat listening to Janot in the shelter. "I have been observing," she said. "Hokan has made much of reinforcing the Nemodian villa under strict security, and he does indeed have most of his handled droids there. The whole building is packed with explosives, most of them, in the wine cellars. But he has also moved Uthan back to the installations." "Our fragrant Reekray friend was right about the double bluff then," Etain said. Nana shrugged. "It's what I do. Defend the strongest position." "So we go for the installations then," she said. "We'll have to deal with both targets. They're only 2 or 3 kilometers apart. Once we start on the main facility, the droids from the villa will pop over for a visit in a matter of minutes." Etain rubbed her forehead. If they followed the plans when they built the facility, then the only way in will probably be through the front door. Diamond shrugged. "We can make our own doors. That's what frame charges and water cuts are for. Sorry. We blow holes in the walls. But I'd rather avoid that if we are dealing with hazardous materials. Don't want to break any bottles, I reckon. There isn't even a fire exit. One door, no windows, no large ventilation shafts. Doesn't look like anyone enforces building regulations around here." Diamond shrugged. "Front door, walls, or drains? Walls would be best. But how we can get into positions unnoticed is another matter." Nana looked at Dahlman as if waiting for a suggestion. A split attack could divert them if it's noisy enough. "Well, if Okan's been kind enough to load up the villa with things that go bang, it would be a shame for them to go to race." Dahlman studied the holochart plan of the villa. "They won't fall for a droid bomb again. But we do have a lot of explosives we could introduce to the mix." "You make it sound as if it's going to be relatively easy," Etain said. "No, it's going to be hard. But that's what we're trained for." "I'd rather have you effecting rapid entry to the main facility," Nana said. "But we should place our own explosives inside the villa. In the cellars if we can," Dahlman said. "A high-energy explosion will set off the rest of their charges. If we can place one, it'll direct the blast upward. And if the droids are on top of the pile, it'll solve that problem too." "Okay, in real terms, there's a layer of solid droid on top of the cellars. Can't free fall in, so it's through the front door, the wall, or the drains. And the drains look like 30 centimeters diameter. ball bangs, Fi said. They won't drill far enough into the ground to penetrate the cellars. And they're not powerful enough anyway. Damian's gaze was fixed on the holographic plan. Although they might be if Aten modified them and packed in a bit of the thermal tape. I was saving it for the blast doors in the facility, but I could spare a meter. That'd be ample. How about a remote? Aten said. If we can direct it into the buildings, that is. If you took out the recording components, you could pack in the thermal tape about a couple of meters easily. They'll be able to spot anything that's flying. Janot in H-Chrone mode. Looked from face to identical face. What size is this device? Damian formed the fist. About this big. I'll show you one. I could carry that to the villa, right to the walls, if you can direct it from there. Nina pointed into the shimmering image of the building, down the roof vent, which would put it in the main hall, running from front to back. Or maybe along the main drain from the culvert about 200 meters behind the house. I like that better. Eugene joined in the communal ritual of staring at the holographic display, as if an answer would eventually emerge on its own. The only point in blowing up the villa is if you could hit as many droids with it as possible. Then we have to convince them we are going all out for the villa, Nina said. That means a feint of some sort, which would be fine if you had more men, but we don't. The Nitane did have an idea, and it was one that she wasn't proud of. How about sending Hokan a direct message, she said. What if Gutane were to escape and tell him we were planning to attack the villa? But he knows there are 4 of us, Damian said. Sorry, 5. 6, Janot said sourly. We could convince the Weekway that we have another squad or 2 in the area, Etain said. At this point, he'll believe anything I tell him, but I'll be sending him to his death. Fi nodded. Yeah. If Hokan skewers him without waiting to hear what he's got to say, we're stuffed. He was cheerfully benignly callous. Etain was briefly appalled before letting the reality wash over her. Given the chance, Gutane would have abused and killed her without a second thought. Aside from that, the squad's target was effectively a weapons factory. A weapon that would kill millions of men, just like Nina, Fi, and Atin, and Darman. If they didn't kill, they would be killed. It didn't take her long to move from her reverence for all living things to thinking waste the Weekway. She wondered if that was the true nature of corruption. I'll do my best to give him a good opening line, Etain said. He's scum, Janot said suddenly. If his death can help remove the Trade Federations and all their minions from my world, then it is a cheap price to pay. My world, Etain obviously had the same thought as the Commandos, because they all reacted, looking at the shapeshifter expectantly. We didn't realize this was your homeworld, Nina said. It is, Janet said. I'm among the last of my kind. Various invaders have driven us from our habitat without even seeing us. And now I doubt they would have done any differently had they known we were here. Yes, we'll help you rid this world of Namodians and every other hostile alien species that's here. That's our bargain with the Republic. You help us, we help you. That's why we risk our lives. It is not for the greater glory of your cause. Nobody told us, Etain said. I'm sorry. I can't speak for the Republic, but we'll do our best to see that they keep their word. Mark that you do, the general said. She indicated the Commandos with a swing of her fine black head. Like your young friends here, we are few, but we have no problem inflicting a great deal of damage. Etain could only nod. At least Jinat was brutally honest. Perhaps telepaths deprived of secret thought had no other style of interactions. The creature was staring at her, all unblinking orange eyes, and she could see for the first time that the four fangs protruding over the Gulanin's lower lips each ended in a double point. There are gray scent marks around this camp, Janet said stiffly. The Gadans won't bother you tonight. She slipped away and merged with the land, leaving a trail of rustling noises as she moved through the bushes. Okay, let's see what Gusine can manage, Nina said. If we don't see signs of movement toward the villa by midday tomorrow, we'll go in anyway, and that'll mean splitting the squad and taking both groups of droids. We really don't want to do that if we can help it. This has the makings of a diverting evening, Vi said. Anyone for support? Anyone for supper? It was an elaborate charade, and the bizarre thing was that it needed no rehearsal. Gudene was entirely unquestioning. Etain had begun to see him as a monstrous and sadistic child, unable to comprehend the feelings of others or control his own. They sat around and ate the mealy stew with dried kuvara, talking about leaving enough for the other squad when it showed up. They discussed in hushed tones about how the villa was their target. If this was the misinformation game, it was an easy one. Even so, Etain definitely didn't feel proud of her subterfuge when she cut the ties around the Reque's wrists, ostensibly an act of kindness, so that he could eat. It was designed to send him to his death. At least she felt some relief that as soon as it was dark, and they made a show of turning their backs on him and being preoccupied, Gudene would try to escape and vindicate Janot's judgment that he was scum. The decision still sat heavy on her. Fire and Darman were asleep. Judging by the positions of their heads, it was impossible to tell with their helmets on. But they were sitting against a tree, chins resting on their breastplates, and arms folded over the rifles clutched to their chests. She had no doubt that if she walked over to them, they'd wake and be on their feet in a second. She glanced up. Nina was on watch, perched in the fork of a tree with one leg dangling, occasionally peering down his rifle scope at something. "What can he see?" she asked. Atin, cross-legged with an array of rayas and detonators spread around him, looked up. He'd taken off the armor section that protected his backside and was using it as a convenient plate for components while he worked. Line of sight. Up to 30 kilometers in good viz. Connected to a remote ship system. Well, you name it. Etain. He pointed to his rifle and then went on packing tight-coiled black and white ribbons of explosive into the remote. "Have a look through the Ds. Safety's on, but don't press anything." Etain shouldered the rifle. It was a lot lighter than it looked, and the view through the scope was startlingly vivid, despite the failing light. She found it difficult to shut out the display that was superimposed on her field of vision. It narrowed the view to a tight focus on the target. "Is this what you see through that visor?" "Sort of." "Can I try the helmet? I want to know what it's like to be inside it." Atin gave her a dubious look and shrugged. "You won't get all the readouts without the rest of the armor system, but you'll see enough. It's top shelf. They upgraded it just for this mission." She lifted the helmet and held it above her head. A bizarre coronation. As she lowered it into place, the feeling of confinement and stifling heat almost made her nauseous, but she steeled herself to tolerate it. "Hot," she said. "It's fine when it's sealed to the rest of the suit," Atin said. He got to his feet and loomed in her field of vision. "See the red light in the top corner? Look at it and blink twice fast." She did. It unleashed chaos. All she could see now was a riot of lines and numbers and flashing symbols. She was aware of a normal view beyond it, but the rest of the data dancing before her eyes was overwhelming. "That's the HUD," Atin said. "Heads-up display. Real-life saver. The proverbial eyes in your backside. It's distracting. How do you cope with it? You get used to it fast. We've used these systems all our lives. You can filter the information out, like listening to our conversations in a crowd. Etain lifted the helmet off and inhaled. Cool evening air. And you can communicate without any audible sound outside the helmet? Yes, and even without command and control hearing us on certain frequencies. I don't think ordinary troopers can do that. But we are different. Separate specialized training. They're trained from day one to be more obedient than us. And we are more obedient than ARC troopers. They're pretty well raw Django. He was talking about himself as if he were a commodity. Etain found it uncomfortable. Yes, these young men were odd because they were externally identical, but they were still individual men, and not exotic houseplants or strains of grain. She understood that the Republic faced desperate times. She just wondered how many desperate measures that could justify. Somehow, it seemed an affront to the Force to do this to fellow humans, even if they seemed remarkably sanguine about it. She handed him back his helmet. We use you, don't we, Etain? All of you. No soldier has it easy. He fumbled with a length of wire, clearly embarrassed, brow furrowed in mock concentration. The fresh scar from cheek to chin was all the more shocking, etched into fresh young skin, and not a battle-hardened, wrinkled face that indicated a full life. But I like this job. What else would I do? It was a painfully good question. What would any of them do if they were discharged from the Grand Army? She reached out and squeezed his arms instinctively, but all she grasped was plastroid alloy plate. I know what happened to you, she said. She concentrated a precision's job. Just enough to influence him to see what was true and reasonable, but not to make mockery of his natural grief. What happened to your brothers wasn't your fault. You're a good soldier. Sometimes the odds are too far against you. He stared down at his boots. Eventually, he looked up and shrugged. I'll do my best to make sure this bunch stays alive then. There was little indications on his face that the gentle push toward acceptance had worked, but Etain felt less of a jagged tear in the force around him. He might heal in time. And time was something none of the clone commandos would have. It made her ashamed. Can I help with anything? Etain said. You could help me put some remote debts into these. I told Da I'd finish them for him. Etain indicated small packs of mining explosives and handed something that looked like a packet of steel toothpicks. Slide these between the ribbon and the main charge. makes any party go off with a bigger bang. What are they? IEDs, he said. Great for planting down drainage systems and air conditioning ducts. Not more acronyms. Improvised explosive devices. Be sure you make them look neat. Dawes fussy about his devices. It was a relatively simple but fiddly task. Etain was a quick learner. They sat in silent concentrations, making bombs as casually as if they were shelling quinoa beans. This is how it happens, she thought. This is how you slide from peacekeeper to soldier to assassin. Can I ask you a favor? Etain said, not looking up from the bomb in progress. Of course. May I look at your lightsaber? Etain smiled. Well, you've shown me yours, so it's only fair if I should show you mine. She took out the hilt and held it up to him. He wiped his palms on his bodysuit and took the saber carefully. That's the dangerous end, and this is the control. He showed no inclinations to activate it. He seemed absorbed by the hilt and its markings. Go on, Etain said. The lightsaber flared into blue light with a vzm. Etain didn't even flinch. He simply stared down the length of the blade and seemed to be checking it for true. It doesn't feel like a weapon, he said. It's a beautiful thing. I made it. That changed his expression. She had struck a chord with him, one builder of gadgets to another. Now that is impressive. Etain enjoyed the respect, being treated with differences as an officer made her squirm. But this felt good, so I think I'm pretty good at something, and someone else thinks I'm good at it too. It was a boost that she surely needed. Etain thumped off the blade and handed the hilt back to her with suitable reference. I'd still rather have plenty of distance between me and the enemy, he said. This is a close-in weapon. Maybe. I need to practice my more remote skills, Etain said. You never know when telekinesis might come in handy. They went on bundling explosives with ribbon charges and stacking the packages in a heap. She heard and felt Daman relieve Nina on watch. Their respective presences ebbed and flowed, merging at one point as they crossed paths. Through the night, Etain alternated between dozing and checking on Goutonnet. She was careful not to give him the idea that she was watching him, and instead concentrated on sensing whether he was still there, sitting in the lee of a tree, with his knees drawn up to his chest. Sometimes he slept. She could feel the absence of mental activity, almost like sensing a plant. Other times he woke and felt more vivid and chaotic like a predator. It was getting light again. It had been a long and restless night. And still, Goutonnet sat there. He'd made no attempt to escape. Of course he won't. Etienne felt her stomach nodding. He's terrified of Hokan. He wants to stay with us. We're the good guys, the civilized guys. Once again, she was horrified by her ruthless and almost involuntary calculations of benefit against evil. She wandered past to the shelter made of leaves, tarpaulin, and a camouflage net that seemed to be handmade. Nina, now clearly asleep, still wearing full armor, was curled up on his side, one arm folded under his head. Etienne was reading his datapad. Vi was finishing the cold remains of the Merle stew. He glanced up at her and held out the mess tin. I'll pass, thanks. Fat had congelated in unappetizing yellow globules on the surface. It seemed soldiers could sleep anywhere and eat anything. This couldn't be a moral dilemma. It was obvious. These men had become her responsibility, both as an individual and as a Jedi. She owed it to them to see that they survived. She liked them. She cared for what happened to them. And she wanted to see Etienne live long enough to overcome his demons. And she could do something that even they couldn't. Goutonnet, she said, putting her hand on the weak boy's shoulder. He opened his eyes. Goutonnet, you're not afraid. You want to go to Gez Hokan and tell him what you know. You want to offer him information about the Republic forces in exchange for your life. You want to tell him that they plan to attack the villa because they think the forces at the facility are a decoy. Goutonnet stared past her for a moment, and then stood up. He picked his way through the bushes and headed east toward Imbrani. Etienne knew she had now taken a second life. She pinched the bridge of her nose, eyes screwed shut, and wondered what had happened to her, what Master Fulia would have thought had he been alive. Then she was aware of someone watching her. She looked up. Daman, perched in the same fork of branches as Nina had been, stared down. It's hard to send someone to their deaths, she said, answering his silent question. His expression was hidden behind the visor of his helmet. She didn't need to call on any of her abilities as a Jedi to know what he was thinking. One day, she would do the same to men like him. The realizations caught her unawares. You'll get used to it, he said. She doubted it. "14. There is nothing wrong with fear. You need never be ashamed of it, as long as it doesn't stop you functioning. Fear is your natural warning system. It keeps you alive so that you can fight. Show me a man who isn't afraid, and I'll show you a fool who is a danger to his entire ship. and I do not tolerate fools in my navy. Admiral Adar Talon, addressing the new intake at the Republic Academy. Hoken stood on the veranda of Ankit's villa and stared out at a bright autumnal morning. There were still too many leaves on the trees for his liking. They were out there somewhere, Republic forces, a handful, but they were not an army. He walked to Uthan's laboratory complex, a comfortable 15-minute stroll. It occurred to him that he was a good target for a sniper. If a sniper had been able to penetrate Mandalorian armor. Even so, he decided to divert via a coppice. His path took him along a dry stone wall to the rear of the installations, and he made a complete circle of the farm building before walking up to the single entrance at the front. As a lure, this was a good one. The line of droids across this entrance was spectacular. Hoken made a point of inspecting them at a leisurely pace, and then engaged them in conversations about their cannons. If anyone was observing, soldier, spy, or talkative farmer, they would get the message. Inside, though, Dr. Uthan was losing her glamorous cool. "Is this the last time you're going to move me?" she said, tapping her nails against the polished metal of her desk. Her files and equipment were still in packing crates. "My staff members are finding this extremely stressful, as am I." Hoken took out his datapad and projected a holochart of the installations above the surface of the desk. The place was a cube within a cube, below ground level. The accommodations, storage, and offices lay in a ring around the central core. The core contained a square of 8 small laboratories, with one more, the secure room, nestled in the center. The rest of the complex had bulkheads that could be brought down and sealed to isolate a biohazard. Escape. It could be defended, but it wouldn't come to that. He'd laid a careful trail to Ankit's villa, and a greeting from 50 droids, along with cannons and powerful explosives. He wanted to get it over with. "Yes, Doctor, this is the last time I'll move you," he said. "Try to understand why I've done this, Doctor. I believe I'm facing a small commando force. Rather than chase them, which could be diversionary, I've decided to bring them to me. This means they'll be facing a conventional infantry and artillery battle that I don't think they're equipped to fight. Those are battles of numbers. I'm not sure if I do see your point, actually. We can defend these installations. I have the numbers and the firepower. Sooner or later, they'll take casualties. You're certain about this?" "Not certain, but everything I see suggests they have landed a minimal amount of troops. For example, no evidence of large-scale transport. They hijacked explosives from McCrory to destroy the Teklet ground stations. If they had the material, they wouldn't have bothered. And then again, maybe that's a diversionary tactic too. Hoken looked up from the holochart. Nobody has perfect knowledge in battle. No plan survives contact with the enemy. Yes, I'm making an educated guess, as every commander in history has had to do. Uthan considered him with cold black eyes. You should have evacuated my project from the planet. Hoken folded his arms. When you move, you're vulnerable. You're vulnerable crossing the countryside between here and the spaceport. You're even more vulnerable attempting to leave Quiloa with a Republic assault ship on station. And now we have no communications beyond runners. And a bunch of droids. Relaying messages. No, we sit tight. Uthan indicated the world of rooms behind her with one hand. If this comes to a pitched battle, what about my project? What about my staff? Those 5 scientists represent the best microbiologists and geneticists in the CIS. In many ways, they are more important than the biomaterial we hold. We can start again, even if the work so far is lost. It's as dangerous for them to leave as it is for you. I see. You specified a very secure layout when you had this facility built. You must know it's defensible. Uthan seemed suddenly fixed on the holochart in front of her. It showed hydraulic emergencies bulkheads and chambers within chambers. It showed ventilation systems with triple filters. It could be sealed as tightly as a bottle. It's not secure enough to stop anything getting in, she said carefully. It's to stop anything getting out. You said the nanovirus was only lethal for clone troops. There was a pause. The sort of pause Hoken didn't like. He waited. He stared at her, and he was disappointed to see for the first time that she was nervous. He waited for her to continue. He would wait all day if necessary. It will be, she said at last. You said that it might make other organisms merely what was the word unwell? Yes. How unwell, then? If you go to all this trouble to contain it. Very unwell. Dead unwell? Possibly. Depending on whether the exposed subject has certain sets of genes. Hoken experienced a rare moment of uncertainty. It wasn't because he was closer to a dangerous virus than he supposed. It was because someone had lied to him, and his instinctive way to deal with that was a violent one. The fact that he was dealing with a woman was the only thing that made him hesitate. But it was only hesitation. He leaned forward, seized her by her elegant designer collar, and heaved her sharply out of her seat across the desk. Never lie to me, he said. They were eye to eye. She was shaking, but she didn't blink. Get your hands off me. What else haven't you told me? Nothing. You didn't need to know the details of the project. This is your final chance to tell me. If there's anything else I should know. She shook her head. No, there isn't. We're having some problems isolating the parts of the virus that will attack only clones. They're human. All human races share the majority of genes. Even you. He held her for a few more seconds, and then let go, and she fell back into her chair. He really should have shot her. He knew it. It would have made her staff more compliant. But she was a significant part of the asset. He hadn't gone soft because she was a woman. He was certain of that. Understand this, he said, feeling suddenly very uncomfortable. This means we are sitting on a weapon that might destroy us as easily as it will destroy the enemy. It places constraints on how we fight. He went back to the holochart and indicated various features of the installations with his forefinger. You're sure it can't escape into the environment? Uthin was staring at his face, not at the chart. It was as if she didn't recognize him. He snapped his fingers and pointed at the chart. Come on, Doctor, pay attention. That's the biohazard containment area. Impregnable, for obvious reasons. I was thinking we might retreat in there for the time being. I would prefer to keep you and the biomaterial separate. In fact, I would prefer also to keep you separate from your staff. I dislike having all my eggs in one box. If the enemy ever breaches this facility, then they won't be able to destroy the project in one action. If they eliminate one part, we can still salvage the other components, be they personnel or materials. These rooms aren't as secure in biohazard terms, but they are relatively secure in terms of stopping someone from getting at them. The hazardous materials can stay in the central biohazard chamber. Yes, she said, I can see that. Then get your people moving. You think it'll come to that, to a battle? No, not here. But if it does, this gives me the best chance of succeeding. You're prepared to fight while sitting on a bomb? Effectively, yes, your bomb. And if we're both sitting on it, it'll motivate us to prevent its detonation, won't it? I think you're a dangerous and foolhardy man. And I think you're a woman who's lucky that she has relatively immunity through her value to the separatist cause. Hoken straightened up. Maybe she wanted an apology. He saw no reason to give one. A scientist expecting half the relevant facts to be acceptable in the solution of a problem. It was sloppy, unforgivably sloppy. I'll have a droid help you if you like. We'll do it ourselves. I know how careful they are with fragile objects. Hoken closed the holochart and walked out into the corridor. Outside, a droid approached him. Captain Rati is bringing a prisoner and a visitor, he said. He says he disobeyed your orders on both. Maybe promoting the man hadn't been such a good idea. But Harati was smart. He'd taken them alive when he should have taken them dead. And that was significant. The young officer wasn't squeamish. Hoken decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. When the droids at the entrance parted to let him pass, Harati was waiting and he had two others with him. One was a Trandoshan mercenary. He carried his distinctive tool of the trade, an APC repeating blaster. The other was no stranger at all. It was Guzene, his former Weequay lieutenant. I got information, the Weequay said, caroling. You better have, Hoken said. With one pair of shoulders missing, Nana had some hard choices to make about what equipment they could take with them. He stared down at the various weapons and piles of ordnance laid out on the ground, astonished by what they had managed to carry, as well as in considerations of what they couldn't take into battle. We could always cache some of stuff near the target, Vi said. 2 trips, double the risk. Aten picked up one of the LJ-50's concussion rifles. He had been most insistent on saving those. Well, I'm taking this conch rifle and the APC array blaster if I'm going into that facility. Don't trust Republic procurement then, Vi said. No point being a snob about gear, Aten said. Don't get stuck in any confined spaces. It was a fair point. With a backpack, these rifle attachments, and sections of cannons, there wasn't a lot of room left to load much else. Nana didn't want to say it aloud, but they were trying to do 2 squads' work. Something had to give. Come on. You know I can carry equipment, Etain said. She didn't look like she could even carry a tune. Battered, disheveled, and a shin. She seemed about to drop. Ask Da Man. That's right, Da, Nina said on the helmet link. Dahman glanced down from his observation point in the tree. Like a bantha, Sarge. Load it up. They could split the E-Rep across 5 of them. That meant an extra piece and a decent supply of extra power cells and ordnance. Okay, Plan A, Nina said. He projected a holochart from his datapad. The nearest suitable laying up point is just under 1 kilometer from the facility. In this coppice here, we tab down there now and deploy 2 surveillance remotes to give us a good view of both the facility and the villa. Depending on the situation, we can try to come back for the spare gear during the day. It's 2 clicks each way. Not a lot, but it's daylight. And if Gutane did the business, we'll have a lot of attention. I'm up for it, Aten said. We are going to need it. Go on with Plan A, Etain said. As we agreed. Get a remote loaded with ribbon charge into the villa, and do what damage we can, while Phi lays down fire at the rear of the facility. Darman blows the main doors, and I go in with Atin. If we can't get the remote into the villa, then we have to Then we have to tie the droids down with a split attack. Plan B. Etain chewed her lower lip. That sounds almost impossible. I never said we had good odds. And I'm not that much use against droids. You would be if you had one of these, Etain said, and offered her the Trandoshan's away blaster. Lightsabers are all very well, but we don't want to get too intimate with the enemy, do we? It's a good close-range spread, so you don't even have to be an expert marksman to use it. He made a gesture with his hands. Bang! Serious bang. She took the weapon and examined it carefully. Then shouldered it like a pro. Never used one of these. I'll get the hang of it fast. That's the spirit, ma'am. You should also know that I can move things too, not just carry them. Move with the force. Handy, Fi said. Nina slapped a clip of plasma bolt rounds in Fi's hands to shut him up. We might need you to keep Dr. Uthen cooperative too. Worst comes to worst, we've got sedations for her. But I'd really rather have her walking than as a dead rate. Is there a plan C? The nice thing about the alphabet, ma'am, is that it gives you plenty of plans to choose from, Fi said. Shut up, Fi, Nina said. He has a point, Etain said. She spun around to face the undergrowth. Do you not? The Gurlanin slipped out of the bushes and wandered among the selections of weapons. A glossy black predator again, picking her way between the equipment with careful paws. She sniffed at it. Show me what I need to carry, she said. Can you manage 3 remotes? Etain asked. All bombs? No. 2 holocams, 1 bomb. Very well. You can explain to me what you want done with them when we reach your laying up point, Nina prompted. Lup. You enjoy not being understood, don't you? Part of our mystique and charm, Fi said, and strapped more rubbing onto his armor. They followed the line of the woods, a route that took them a couple of kilometers out of their way, but offered the shortest distance over open terrain. Etain, Nina still struggled with first name familiarity. Even in his mind, kept close to Darman, she seemed to like him. She was polite and sympathetic to the rest of them, but she certainly liked Darman. Nina could see it on her face. She exuded concern. He heard snatches of conversations. How did you ever carry all the Ereb sections alone? No idea. Just did, I suppose. She was a Jedi. Scarata said they were fine people, but they didn't and couldn't care about anyone. But he got close very quickly under fire. He wasn't going to ask Darman what he was playing at, not yet. They reached the edge of the woodland and came into a 100-meter stretch of race-high grass. Fi went forward as point man. Sprinting and dropping was now beyond them. But there appeared to be nothing around to spot the gray armor anyway. So they walked at a crouch. Nina's back was screaming for rest. It didn't matter how fit you were. When you pushed yourself this hard, it hurt. When they reached the coppice, it was painkiller time. Nina stripped off his arm plate and peeled back a sections of suit. He didn't bother finding a vein. He stabbed the needle into a muscle. Know the feeling, Diamond said. He dropped his pack and sat down, legs outstretched. Anyone taking any stims so far? Not yet, Nina said. I reckon we should all dose up 1 hour before moving. Just to make sure we are 100%. He glanced at Etain, wondering how she might appear after a week of normal meals, unbroken sleep, and clean clothing. She looked worryingly frail now, even though she was doing a valiant job of keeping up. You two, especially you. Can Jedi take stimulants? What exactly do they do? The equivalent of 10 hours good solid sleep and 4 square meals, until they wear off. I ought to draw on the Force to sustain my stamina, she said. But the Force could do with a bit of help right now. Count me in. She sat down and rested her head on her folded arms. Maybe she was meditating. Nina switched to helmet comms. Duh. She's not going to collapse on us, is she? We can't carry anything else. If she drops, it'll be because she's dead, he said. Trust me. She's tougher than she looks. Physically, anyway. She'd better be. Let's get those remotes deployed. Janot had identified a couple of high points to place the cam remotes. One was on a gutter of a farm building overlooking the entrance to the facility. The other was a tree whose canopy gave a good 270-degree view of the villa. The third remote, the one loaded with ribbon charge, needed more careful placement. She sat up on her hind legs, and a pouch formed on her stomach, like a cook's apron. Normally I would carry my young around in this, she said. She placed the 3 spheres in the pouch, giving the impression that she'd swallowed some particularly lumpy prey. But if I don't help you, my chances of raising another little are remote. So I considered it an appropriate act. Nana was as fascinated as ever by the Galanin. The more he saw of the creature, the less he knew about them. He hoped he might have the chance to find out more one day. In an hour, it would be midday. Aten took out his ration pack and mess tin, a flat sheet that snapped into shape. He placed his remaining ration cubes in it and held it out. How much have we got among us? I'm down to half a day's worth, Fi said. Me too, Nina said. Diamond reached into his pack and pulled out a carefully wrapped brick-sized bag. A day's worth of cubes and this dried kuvara and jerky. Let's pool this and have 2 meals before we go in. If we pull this off, we'll be running too fast to have lunch. If we don't, it'd be a shame to die hungry. Guess my voice, Aten said. Nana was going to ask Etain, but she was sitting cross-legged, with her eyes shut and her hands in her lap. Daman put a finger to his lips and shook his head. Meditating, he mouthed silently. Nana hoped she emerged from it transformed. He was still one squad short of an adequate force for this job. You have 10 seconds to live, Gezoken said. He took out Fulia's lightsaber, and the blue shaft of energy buzzed into life. He wondered what made the blade a constant finite length each time. Speak. Gutane, looking more bemused than he recalled, ignored the lightsaber. I've been captured by soldiers. I get away. Republic troops, human? Yes, they catch me. They make me carry stuff. Hoken seethed the blade. They obviously spotted your talents. How did you get away? They were sleeping. They not care I go. How many soldiers? 4. And Girly. Girly. Gudane pointed at the lightsaber. She got one like that. So the woman was with them was a Jedi. Just 4? They got another lot. He pursed his lips, grappling with a new word. Squad. Very well. So we have 2 squads. 8 men. That would fit. Hoken turned to Harati. And our Tundoshan's friend? He says he's highly irritated about his business being interrupted, sir. And he offers himself and 3 colleagues to help you deal with the inconvenience. Thank him and accept his offer, Hoken. Hoken turned back to Gutane. I want you to think very hard. Did they say what they were going to do? Where they were going? The villa? How predictable people were. The locals would tell you anything for money. Sell you their daughters. Inform on their neighbors. Hoken had half expected the ruse to be almost too obvious. You're doing well. Tell me, what equipment they have? Blasters, explosives. The Weequay made an indications of great width with his hands. Big gun. They got armor with knives and gloves. Describe. Like yours. What do you mean, like mine? Gutane indicated his head and made a T-shape with his fingers. Your helmet. It was difficult to take in. Gutane was an inarticulate brute. But there was no ambiguity in his descriptions. Are you saying they were wearing Mandalorian armor? Yeah, that's it. You're sure about that? Sure. Anything else? Hoken wondered how he expected this creature to be able to assess intelligence. Anything else unusual? Gutane concentrated on the question, as if his life depended on it, which it did not. Hoken would kill him anyway. They all looked the same. They were wearing uniforms? No, the men, same faces. Children could be unerringly accurate in their observations of detail. And so could stupid adults. Gutane was describing something that Dr. Uthin had told him about. Soldiers, identical soldiers, mindlessly obedient soldiers, clone soldiers. Hogan couldn't believe that clone troopers could operate like this. And the one weapon that would work against them was denied him. Because in its present state, it would kill everyone, Uthan and her team included. But there were probably only 8 of them. He had nearly 100 droids. He had weapons. Harati, Harati. The young captain came running and saluted. Sir, I think we face a 2-pronged attack. There are 2 squads, and I find it unlikely to imagine that they would not have one squad attack the villa, while the other made an attempt on the most obvious target. Divide the droid platoons between the locations. That's what you would do with 2 squads, sir. Not concentrate your forces. Yes, if I weren't sure my objectives were consolidated in one place. They can't know who and what it is in which building. And they'll attack at night. Because while they're bold, they're not stupid. He shook his head, suddenly interrupted by his own preoccupation. Who would have thought clones could carry out this sort of operations? Uthan said they were no more than cannon fodder. Commanded by Jedi, sir. Perhaps our tacticians is the woman. It was an interesting idea. Hokan considered it for a moment, then realized that Gutane was waiting expectantly, oddly upright and apparently unafraid. Well, Hokan said, I tell you stuff. You let me live? Hogan activated the lightsaber again and held it out to his side, just above the level of his right shoulder. Of course not, he said, and swung the blade. It would be bad for morale.